Welcome to the Conversations with Good Brothas talk show, everyone. Happy New Year to everybody. Definitely excited to be back with another show. How was your day, man?
First of all, I wish everybody Happy New Year too, good brother. Hope everybody had a wonderful holiday season. Shawn, was cool, man. The day was cool. It's cold as heck outside today, man. You know, we got our first little brush of snow.
Yeah.
And, I got like 36 steps. I had to tweak the steps today to put some salt down, man. So, that was an adventure. Got some exercise, sweeping snow, and not only the snow. I don't like when it's still and it's cold as heck. So, right. It was just today. It's supposed to be freezing all week, but winter's here.
I know.
Everything's good with your day, Black man.
Man, you right. She did. You know what? I thought that the almanac was gonna be wrong, but it said this was supposed to be the coldest winter.
Okay.
And we really haven't had a cold winter until like today.
Right. But that doesn't cut you off, man. But I'm always amazed, like after the summer, when people are like, man, this would be the coldest winter ever. I'm like, you know that in September? You know what I mean? Like, you know that in September. Like, people decide, it's supposed to be cold this winter. Like, no, it's September 18th. You know what I mean? Like, we're still growing. Yeah, right. Like, I want to hear that, man. You snow off the, you know what I mean? So, it's crazy. It's crazy ironic. I remember last year when I came back from Jamaica in like November, and I remember leaving Jamaica in like 80-degree weather. And it was 86. 4 hours later, I landed in Pittsburgh. It was like 4 inches, man, in 4.5 hours. And I know last year it snowed from November all the way to April. So we have been fortunate to have a mild winter so far. Right, all these Nostradamus people I heard who think such a terrible winter. Right here is January 6th, and we just now getting some snow. But also today is my daughter's birthday, man.
Oh wow, man!
Yeah, man. So I'm Zaire, man. I'm sorry, her name, but she turned 21 today. Man.
Oh wow! Happy birthday! Happy birthday, young man.
Beautiful.
Yeah, happy birthday. That's awesome, man.
Yeah, man. I'm 21 years old, man. So life is good, man. Today's a beautiful day. Woke up with that on my mind.
Cool. I'm excited, man.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
Always good to be here rapping to you, man.
Yeah, likewise, man. Likewise. This week's topic, talking about the shift in the male's mind state as a result of generational changes.
Mm-hmm.
That's a powerful topic.
Yeah, we was working on that earlier this week. We had a couple people, a couple callers who was asking us about that. So we're trying to figure out how we're going to spend this conversation.
Right.
The male's mind state set.
Anywhere, man.
Yeah.
We can start anywhere. It's not like, again, we wasn't, we younger dudes, but, we can't speak on what it was like growing up in the 1930s.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? But we did pay attention to, you could read history and you could watch old movies, but, I know my grandma,
mm-hmm.
How they used to talk about the men and what was expected of the men,
mm-hmm.
back, in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And I'm sure times have changed for those people that have, a little older than that.
Right. I'm just thinking from being like being a studier of history, when you look at, back in the day, you see, from being we hear about guys going into the military at 14. You know what I mean? Like, you figure in World War I, World War II, you see here, people forging their birth certificate were lying about their age to join the military at 14. Why is it there? So when I'm being a teacher or being, mentoring young kids throughout the community, I'm looking at these 14-year-olds nowadays and like, there's no, I can't even fathom. Right. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
A young man, going into war based on the immaturity of a lot of guys we see nowadays. I'm just thinking like, back in the day, 12-year-olds do like 12 hours of work out in the field, making money. Versus now they play PlayStation games for 12 hours. So that generational change is a serious experience in the male mindset, as you said. And that's, something that we're going to talk about. We're going to delve into a little bit deeper as the evening go on.
I think I think you brought up some of the points that I wanted to talk about too, because you talk about how generations have changed. One of my opinions is that the mindset has changed because the interests have changed. You know what I mean? Like you know, when you look back in the day, whether it be I can't pinpoint a decade, but whether it be the 70s, the 60s, or the 50s, whenever you didn't have all this technology, you know, your interest might have been sports, even your interest might have been education in a certain time. But nowadays, as we in the technology time, your interest is this PlayStation and this Xbox. So you know what I'm saying? So your mom and dad talking about take out the garbage and all this, and this is your duty. Or, you know, how do you change a car tire? You're like, I'm not worried about that. And it's like you only sticks. Yeah,
I'm about to go hiking shit on this. I remember being in college, man, and I think, you know, going back to the shit like a PlayStation, I'm blessed that no knock on, I don't never knock if people do what they do. But I was never one of these guys that, actually played PlayStation games. But I remember in college, my college days were, when the height of the Sega PlayStation and all that, when we get out to the dorm rooms playing, I guess, NBA Live or whatever it is, and I'm like, let's go to the gym and cap, like, you know what I mean? Lights on these sticks. I'm like, there's a gym right down there. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you ain't trying to go play. Like, nah, like, and I started to see the shift then, like, wow, man.
What decade was that?
I would say 90s.
Early
90s, man, when PlayStation, when Bo Jackson turned, when everybody was playing Madden or whatever that is, Sega, whatever games, but, you start seeing the shift, like our manly roles. You understand? We wasn't necessarily, doing manly things. You had mentioned, like, back in the day where men were doing manly things. What examples I used, man, when I was in college, I went to the craziest thing that I was up in New York, and I was hanging out with my man, a couple guys from New York, and we had blew a tire. You know what I mean? We was driving, going to hang out, and go hit a night spot, and we had somehow we had blew a tire in the middle of New York, man. So we pulled over. It's like five grown men, you know what I mean? A couple college graduates, and these brothers were looking at me like, "What we gonna do?" And I'm like, "Are we serious?" And I was sitting around like, "Now y'all know how to change the tire." It's like, "Nah, man, I never did that in my life." I'm like, "Wow, change the tire, bro?" Wow. You know what I mean? So some of the things you take for granted, but again, these are, Yankees, New Yorkers, but, so I had a little bit of fun with it. I remember there was like 4 lug nuts on the tire. And I made 4 grown men stand around me, and I held, I put a lug nut each one they had, like, hold this, I think you got a 4th row, hold this lug nut. I just depended on, wow, these dudes. I can see you dropping in there. You just like don't. This world is kind of depends on you. So anyway, that was back in the day, like, wow, man, like nobody, the guys I grew up with, we all knew, we had, Bill, Mike, did all types of stuff. But I was surprised, like I said, early 90s when these gentlemen didn't even know how to change a tire, man.
Yeah, and what's also interesting as you talk is that after the civil rights movement, whenever education started to become more ubiquitous amongst, all people, but definitely amongst minority communities, is that when you saw people get more intelligent and they go to college and all this, it kind of took some of the focus off of some of the trades, some of the more manly. And even when I look at boxing, brother, when I look at the 80s, the 70s and 80s of boxing, when you had Hagler, when you had Duran, cats like that, just, aggressive. They was brawlers. But over time, as Tyson said, athletes are smarter. And as they got smarter, they kind of got a little bit more pretty and fancy in the ring. And it ain't really the same style because the mindset of fighting has changed.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I thought that was very interesting.
Okay. And I guess even with that, it was more barbaric.
Right.
Or, more blonde than thinking. Because boxing, every sport is a thinking game.
Right.
All sports, just the quality of men. Since you're talking about sports, you think about. I think you had some of that clip on a clip of Ali when Ali, was the greatest when he was talking about like, this money ain't worth nothing. If I can't go down and help my sister who was just raped. He was in Miami talking to a Caucasian reporter, and he was saying that if this money don't mean nothing, or these yachts don't mean nothing if I can't go back to the hood and be accepted, not to the inner city, right, fight for what's right for my sisters. And I thought that was very powerful because you think about Jim Brown, Leroy Kelly, and all these great, Muhammad Ali, and some of these great athletes who stood for something. Exactly. 20, 50 years ago versus the mindset of our African American or athletes in general. That they really don't stand for nothing, and it's like, that shift in mindset, whether it's generational or whatever it is, but there has been a shift in our mindset and our obligation, not only to ourselves, but to the community.
And I'm so surprised, and I'm so surprised that as you bring that up, because that was a much more dangerous time for Ali to be talking the way he was on TV. And now today, when you have a more freedom of speech era and that type of thing going on, you get athletes that is scared to say, I don't like chicken nuggets. You know what I mean? I don't like chicken nuggets, man. It's like they're gonna fine you $20,000 because you said you don't like chicken nuggets.
That's powerful. When you see some of the clips of Ali, man, where Ali was like, I'm pretty. Right. I'm a bad man. This is like 1964, where dude, he's telling the reporter, like, be quiet. This is my state.
Right.
You understand? And I can go back all the way back to, I'm thinking of one of the greatest men there, African American men that ever lived, is the great Paul Robeson. Mm-hmm. You understand? When I look at actors who are suckling and duckling in 2014 to 2015, to your point, to where they have a lot more freedom versus somebody like Paul Robeson, who was, back in the 1930s and 20s and 40s, stand up taking lead roles as Sidney Poitiers. Exactly. You know what I mean? The Harry Belafontes, where these guys actually stood for something. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? That generation where, Harry Belafonte is huge on, when you have that platform, you stand for something. Exactly. I mean, Brother Malcolm says, all too often, if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for everything. You understand? And a lot of us, in this generation, pretty much don't have much to stand on.
I was talking to this pastor from Wilkinsburg, actually, up in I forgot what the name of the church was, but he was saying that the '60s was the setup for today. And he said the '60s was the setup for today. So when you think about that time period, what was going on with the war and everything, and I think music as well. Like, look at how music is. Even though I'm a kid of my time, I love hip hop. I like hip hop. Hip hop has a lot of counterproductive messages. So I think that hip hop and music over time, because even the '80s, whenever you have whatever, you know what I'm saying, you can still hear that there was a little bit more riskiness in what they were saying. But today, you could go on radio and say something so tactless, and it's okay. And that's contributed to the mindset too.
Wow. And I was just thinking, my brothers, from having older brothers, and just a lover of music. But when you listen to the Marvin Gaye and all these, the serious songwriters, they were talking about the Marvin Gaye, Let's Get It On, that album where he talking about like the war. He's going into war. James Brown, I'm black and I'm proud. Right. Understand? Like, he's talking about the transition in music. Now, I remember years ago, I don't know why I didn't keep the article, but the parade that comes in the parade section of Sunday paper. Okay. They had a good article about music, and he was saying that, the music is a reflection of the times.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The author of that particular article stated that if you look at the music, it will reflect what's going on in the society at that particular time. I'm like, wow, that's powerful. Right. So to your point, I remember back in the 80s, when that making that transition, Curtis Blow coming out in the 70s, or with this New Birth and all that, then you start coming to the 80s who were dancing. Yeah. You know what I mean? Dancing party, and they start dumbing down the lyrics. Right. You understand? And then that was the evolution of hip hop. Exactly. I mean, when the hip hop was around, people were talking about, what's going on and what's happening in the neighborhoods. And then starting in the late 80s, when NWA came around, you start seeing the shift in their mind, you understand? And then you start seeing the disrespect for women. Mm-hmm. Coming in the 80s and going to the 90s, you had the KRS Ones and the X-Clans and so forth, the Republic Enemy, more conscious rappers. Yeah. Then you had the gangster rap and the thugism starting to come out at the end of the end of the 80s, going into the 90s. You start seeing the shift in the male's mind, right? Because we start taking on that type of that thug type of mentality. And it's amazing because it's beautiful, ugly to see because I transitioned. That was my era.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? But
era crack too.
Yeah, I ain't thinking era.
Drugs.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
With the drug, like how did, and again, something we don't talk about intricately, but the mindset, literally, like how did crack affect the mindset of not just one community, but yeah, you know, our community, but how does that affect the world on a global basis? Because you know that we, you know, our communities, for the music you talk about, we have a big influence. Hip hop has a big influence around the world.
Right.
And when you look at how crack influenced hip hop, what has that done?
And this is the crack generation.
Right.
It's the second generation of drugs. That's powerful. But one of the things I hope Bob Johnson ain't online, but when you talk about crack, I say BET. Yeah, I mean BET was like the destruction of this generation as well because it started giving them negative images. You understand? I remember when I was a young buck, they had Teen Summit. You understand? You know, you had all types of more conscious shows. Yeah. But then, you know, when again that '90s era when things started changing, BET started, exploring and putting these images of us out there, and then this generation got caught up in that because now they didn't see conscious artists. I mean, there's still this neo soul movement, but it was more of the negative side of music than anything else. That's still, that goes on nowadays. Right. But I'm just thinking that era is coming through the 80s and the 90s where you start to see this generation, or the new, I guess, Generation X is what they call it. But now, chivalry start going out the door. Being respectful to, our fellow man, that alone, being respectful to ladies. This generation took a shift. Not even going back to, when that shit started taking about to where, like, I think 20 years prior to that in the 70s, I remember, he wasn't around, but there was there was a show with James Earl Jones that came on. I forgot what the mod, but it was a show about how I guess when welfare kicked in. Right. This was around the 60s and 70s, and welfare started to take like that up. Right. And they started, you talk to the older people when they were saying how the man is starting to be pushed out. Exactly. Pushed out the home. That I think that's when it started. You know what I mean? Because we came out the conscious 50s and 60s, the civil rights movement, and then we came into the 70s, and that was the start of the shift in the family dynamics. I mean, that's powerful. I think in history I read one book, books, but they were saying like in the 80s, in the early 1920s, 90% of African American households were headed by two parents. Then you get to the 60s, they said about 35% of African American households were headed by two parents. As late as the 60s, then we get to the 80s and 90s. Now you're up to like 75% are single headed. Right. So when did we start making that? The man comes out of the household. Right. That's powerful, and I'm glad that you brought up that 70s thing. I remember my mom would always talk about that. She said that they actually tried that with her as well. Like, the man came to the home and said, "Hey, we'll give you this, but he can't be here." You know what I'm saying? Of course, she wasn't with that, but that's just interesting. That's really interesting to again, like the pastor said, the 60s was the center for what's going on today, and I'm wondering where we're going as far as the mindset. I mean, we're seeing it. We're seeing it. And there has been a shift where, like, because I was an infant in those days in the 70s, but women had to start taking on a more masculine role starting in the 20s. Nowadays women had to go to work. Right. You understand? And we're seeing that this is probably second or third generation after that, where we starting to see the results of that, where women taking on more of a masculine role, and the guys taking on a more feminine role. I'm sorry, brothers out there, but we are more feminine because we're not holding it down like we should be. But then you look at the transition because we start getting into drugs in the 70s and 80s, and maybe was that because of I know you had said a blog a couple of days ago about the mentality, how our mentality is not as strong as the the women. But I'm just thinking in that age that when you put out the house, and you seeing that your woman holding it down for your children, that has a psychological effect on you.
Right. That's deep, man. That's deep. I think we should talk a little bit about relationships. I know that as we talked about this, brought it up with some of the people in our circle, conflict was brought up. How it causes conflict in relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think that you touched on it right now because there's been a role reversal. And some men have difficulty dealing with that role reversal because dude, I want to be that head, but you've been so used to being the head of the family that even when I come in, Chris Rock used to joke about it, you want to be, I'm the captain, you want to be the captain too. Going to be one captain, and even when there's two co-captains, there sometimes is difficulty making choices because, everybody wants to have the last say all the time.
Right. A lot of Indians, a lot of Chiefs, right, in this game, but, what do we? I think we were building on. With our meeting when we were building with the sister about those conflicts. And if she's online, we talked about it when we were asking her. There's conflict. And we think conflict is necessary. Right. Conflict ain't necessarily bad. But what she was saying, she broke down the 3 stages of conflict, and she was talking about there's first thing when they're dealing with relationships, how they're looking at men, whether it be conflicting or are we equal? Is this, when we get together, are we sharing the bills? Or is it
or is it the man's job?
Or is it the man's job?
It's the man's job. You got some people who are selective. Right. For them. Yeah.
Good point. Yeah. And traditionally, I think it is. Unfortunately, the cost of living is so high to where, a lot of times, the woman has to work. But she said the second conflict was, just be a contributor. There's men, there's males out here who don't necessarily want to contribute to the household. And we see that a lot. Yeah. And she was saying that the third one can be like the frustration conflict where, you don't necessarily respect this, person. And the guy, you're looking at him like, hey, dude, you don't need to contribute. And the man is mad because mad or disappointed because he wants to contribute and is not contributing, not able to contribute. So that was very interesting. Some breakdown of how she laid that out. I thought it was very interesting because we don't look at when she was talking about how the frustration side of the conflict. We don't look at the man who wants to contribute, but he can't. So that causes conflict. You understand? Where he's projecting that she has a problem with him. Well, she might. She might not because she's seeing you work. Right. And I was thinking what was the movie Heat? One of my favorite movies, Heat. The guy, the brother, the Shawn guy, had to go. He had just got out of jail, and he was working he was working in some type of grease spot. But his woman was stroking like, baby, I see what you're doing, baby. Right. You know what I mean? But he had a problem with that. Like, I should be doing better. Right. You know what I'm saying? That with that male ego, like, man, this ain't. But she was saying, baby, that's something better than nothing. So that that's the side that we don't look at. You know what I mean?
That's a healthy. To me, that's how a healthy relationship should be. You know what I'm saying? As far at that stage. You know what I mean? But there's another point to what you're saying too, because how are both parties accountable for that? Because you got some of these men today who've been babies for the last 20 years by the women, and now you're mad because this person is not contributing, but you haven't developed somebody who is a contributor. You've enabled them. And I think also too, going back historically, is that there's another aspect too, because I'm all for human rights, but as you saw women's rights coming more into fruition, they started getting higher pay, they started getting better jobs. That also contributed to a change in relationships. Yes, sir. And my English teacher used to always joke. He would say, women wanted more rights, they got them. They wanted to drink like us and smoke like us. Now they down like us. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Because there's a pros and cons. We don't talk about there's pros and cons to that.
Can I interrupt for a second? Can I interrupt for a second?
Your brother?
This is Joe.
Who we speaking to, sir?
Joe.
Joe?
Yes.
Joe. Hey, what's up, Joe? Happy New Year.
Hey, Happy New Year to you, brother.
What's up, man?
What's going on? Yeah, well, that's good. I wanted to just, I guess, interrupt for a second because I heard a couple of points that you guys were making about the leadership role, and as far as too many Indians and not enough, well, actually too many chiefs and not enough Indians. And I can just wanted to put a little thought in to that and basically say, as far as the chief part, it goes back into our history to where as though that your parents, my parents, the other brothers that speaking, that his parents, as we were growing up as kids, we were taught to be leaders and not followers, correct?
In most families, yes, sir.
Teach your children to be leaders and not followers, correct? And on the sports
I
field,
agree with that.
On the sports field, you're running around with your teammates, and there's always a team captain, or maybe you are the team captain, or something like that.
I got to call them before they leave out.
Okay.
I guess I'm trying to figure out what you like. I think that's a good point, but what you saying that how does that contribute to the mind state though?
The mindset is how as far as leaders, you're always taught to be a leader. You're not really taught how to be a follower. You don't know how to follow unless you have someone to actually follow. So as far as even in a man in the house or a woman in the house, you're able to follow those people. You understand what I'm saying? A good leader teaches a good follower how to lead. Right. Leaders are not born. Leaders are not born. They're made. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
So as far as with women in the house and the men in the house, and like you were saying, as far as the women getting higher paid jobs and wanting to, the rights and all that good stuff. Now they're thinking they're the leader, and the men are always thinking that they're the leader as well. But one has to take the back seat. Why? Is because someone has to learn how to follow. Someone has to set the example.
That's a great, Joe, man. That's a great point, man. I appreciate you for adding that, man. I think that we're going to build on that. Everybody else. So, hey, Joe, we're going to ask you to put your phone on mute, man. And I appreciate the energy and the contribution, man. Everybody else, we will take some questions. Just put your phone on mute, and I think that's a good place to, you made an excellent point.
Thanks, Joe. We didn't jump in the conversation, but I didn't mention that at the beginning. But what we try to do, because we know there are a lot of good questions out there, and I know sometimes people feel a little bit more comfortable about email. And we started that last week and got quite a few good questions. So with that said, since Joe, thank you again, Joe. Joe, we will touch on his comment. But if for the rest of the listeners who have questions, please email your questions to Darnell Ramsey at hotmail.com. Again, that's Darnell Ramsey at hotmail.com. And we will address some of these questions as they start to pop up. But back to Brother Joe's point, where that's a good point. But they say that a good follower, to your point, for one, in order for you to be a leader, you must learn how. First, you should be a good follower. I think what we were talking about with the Indians, where being a leader takes humility, because you have to know what it is to be led first before you can, self-promote yourself as a leader. And too often, to Brother Joe said, a lot of people ain't even taught how to be a leader. Right. They just assume that they're telling you to be a leader. Just because your coach say be a leader, not a follower, it's a little bit of training that takes place to transition it from a follower to a leader. Right. So thank you for that. That point, Joe. That was a good point. What you got to say about that?
It actually reminds me of something that you used to always say back whenever we started rapping about how the reason why I find older brothers like yourself is because my father taught me how to submit to an alpha male. You know what I'm saying? So to Joe's point, yes, you do have to learn how to follow, and I think that part of the change in the mindset is because, especially for men, that a lot of men who haven't been raised by a certain type of male, they're not used to hearing that male voice. Mm-hmm. So imagine what that does to your psyche whenever you got somebody telling you, pull your pants up, tie your shoes up. Like, you're not used to it. Like, who you talking to? You ain't my dad.
Right.
You know what I mean? What was that?
Yeah, right. But now you're looking at an adversary instead of That's true. Yeah, that's true. Oh, Shawn, we got our first question from Mark from Chicago. He says, "Do women really want the strong male role in the home long term, or is it a selective desire?" That's a great question. Wow. Do the women really want the strong male role in the home long term, or is it a selective desire? Okay.
No, that's a great question. Of course, we can't answer for the woman, but that's a great question in itself because sometimes actually, I think all men kind of have that type of inquiry because on one hand, you want us to do X, Y, and Z, and sometimes when we do it, it ain't enough. You know what I'm saying? And then whenever we do it, they no praise. Not that we looking for you to say good job, baby, but
don't speak for yourself. Speak for yourself, dog. If you get torn out every time you're doing something wrong, when you do something right, you say, "Hey, baby, thank you for that." Right, man. Right. But it shouldn't be take out the trash. But right, you know what I mean. But I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, I think that's a good point. But can't really again. This ain't just one. This ain't just black relationships or Asian relationships. Some again with the new, it ain't just the male mindset. A lot of these women in 2015 have reaped the benefits of the woman's movement, and their mindset has changed as well. They become stronger, more powerful in their different positions. They making just as much or more money.
Right.
And can you really deal with a strong, powerful male?
And I it's interesting because I hear all the time that from my friends. My lady friends who talk about how you hear this thing that they are intimidated, especially if they're professional women. I know that, in corporate America or, they always hear the thing that men are, they intimidate men. You know what I mean? And that's something that I tell them I can't relate to, but I heard it more than, 4 or 5 times, so there must be some truth to that. But I'm thinking that, or can they really assume that a strong role, playing a role male, right, or the role of a male is more than money, right? You know what I mean? It's protecting the home, right? So you paying the bills. Let somebody come through that door with some heat, you know what I mean? And see how hard you is. You know what I mean? So this is when you say, Brother Mark talking about, selective desire. You want, sometimes we'll have that ultra strong lady friend, but then, when like I said, experience when it's a protector, you ain't necessarily, put in a position to be a protector because I think that that is some of our genetic roles as men as being protectors.
I want to touch real quick is one of the things, perfect example of something that I talk about in my new book. I remember one time, man, when he was rapping, he said, "Man, we got to do a better job of doing history on the person that we get into a relationship with first." Mm-hmm. And I noticed that I respect my wife's family so much. I love her family. You know what I'm saying? Just as much, almost just as much as I love my own family. And when I went over there, to where she's from, I remember one time we were on the kitchen and, in her culture, they all congregate together all day. So I tried to take out the trash. I'm like, I got it. No, we got it. I'm like, what? Like, what you mean? Like, what's the mindset? Like, my dad always said, you the bear, you the young man, you take out the house. But in her family, because at the time there wasn't that many males, they were so used to doing everything by themselves that when a strong male like myself came around, it was like the lion versus 20 lionesses. You know what I mean?
Wow. So that might be that selective desire. Or something you want to land for the things that you
right.
Brother Mark was talking about. Right. I want you to take out the trash. Right. But I might not want to hear your mouth. Right. I might not want to hear something you got to say.
Exactly.
I want you to fix my car. But I don't want you to say anything else. Right. So we all had that's the thing. Okay. We have Latika from Pittsburgh. She said, "Is this only a woman's role to go to the kids' extracurricular activities?"
You know what I'm saying? Why don't you talk about that one?
Oh yeah, I mean, I always thought that was interesting because when you go to these little football games, these community football games, and you look up at the stand, there's brothers. I commend those are the guys who are coaching them. But when you look up in the stand, it's full of women. When you go to practice, you know what I mean? It's full of women, and sometimes it may appear that sister's role, but words. I thank you for that, Sister Latika, for emailing me. But I think that's perfect because I don't think it's their role.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I think one of the beautiful things. I know I used to love taking my daughter to the park. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You understand? Like it was like to me. I had like a little swag, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm going through, and I'm seeing all these women in the playground. I got my daughter and my niece. Yeah. You know what I mean? I do a little extra. I start holding their hands and get them, bring their hair and all that. I'm like, oh, you know what I mean? So I'm like, that was a free activity. You know what I mean? Taking my daughter to, you sit up there, well, yeah, I got my daughter, you get attention. You know what I mean? So I would encourage brothers to do more activity outside of sports. Right. You know what I mean? Where you see, you look on TV, you see some of these shows where, their daughter's doing a recital, and, you see our other counterparts, couples that you don't see too many of us in our culture, attending these events. So I would encourage, people to attend. And one of the things that I'm glad Sister Latika talked about that, spending time with their kids or taking their kids to events, one of the things that's very discouraging, and one of the things that a lot of people may hear me say is that, unfortunately, in our community, man, we spend more time with our pit bulls than we spend with our children.
Mm.
You know what I mean? There's some guys out here who will get up and tomorrow when it's 12 degrees and walk that daggone dog for a walk. You know what I mean? But you won't walk the chill. You won't walk your kids to the bus stop, or won't walk your kids to class. Yeah. And then not only that, you get home off work, you're tired, bro. Right. But you take that pit bull for a walk. Right. But you can't take your daughter or your son to the movie or take them out to dinner or sit down and do their homework with them. Right. You understand? So that's something that is very powerful. Well, we got there's another one. Yeah, we got another one. Oh wow! From my brother Sadiq from Washington D.C. He says, "How can we raise or restore a sense of morality to the black community? Our morals do not seem strong enough across the board to redeem us collectively, to raise it to the level of conquerors in the worldly realm, to the point where we are truly captains of our destiny." Wow! Too often we do not put God first. We worship consumerism and American gods. Wow, that's powerful. Thank you. Morality. Morality, that's powerful, brother Sadiq. I'm finishing up on my book, Character. You know what I mean? The book I'm writing about character, that's what he talked about. Like, we don't value character. We don't value morale. We don't have no morals. Mm-hmm. You understand? How can we need to restore that in our community? Like, our young people don't have morals. I mean, just a couple weeks ago, we had in Pittsburgh, for the people who are from Pittsburgh, we had a battle royale out one of our popular malls on the Roadville Mall. Right. You know what I mean? And this wasn't guys. Right. This was girls. And sometimes when we talk about character, we always worry about men. Right. And men and boys. Right. But when they showed the video clips of that, these were little girls throwing at people's necks. Yeah. You know what I mean? Not only that, the character of the moral is, you videotaping somebody getting a girl stomping on somebody's head. Exactly. You posting on YouTube. Exactly. Or Facebook. You ain't calling 911. No. You ain't calling for. Yeah. The first thing you think about is, oh wait, a world star. World stars and morals. Yeah. I mean, like that's a very, and that's where we got to get back. And I always say, like I said before, people know me. I ran a program, a single parent program, single mothers program, raising young men for a couple of years. But one of the things I talked about, we know there's an issue. And I'm not one of these people, people who know me. I like to put more energy in the solution than worry about the problems. Mm-hmm. So, we know that though certain men are not, taking care of the responsibility of being accountable for the actions. But one of the things I talk to the moms in my program is that it's your job, without or with the man, is to teach your kids character. Right. You understand? Instill morals and values in them. Right. You don't need a man now. Right. Instill morals and values. Right. Me and my brother was talking about that situation, coming back to that situation out in the mall, that these parents, because none of these kids are young kids, they only have a driver's license. Mm-hmm. How do they get to the mall? Ooh. The parents come off to the mall. Wow. I know it's hundreds of kids. Yeah. So when you picked up the kid, you seen the broad in the news, what was your conversation in the car? At the day. Did you get out on the girl? Yeah, right. That was it. Did you beat that beat that? Right. Right. That was your conversation. My niece was telling me they knew that this was going to pop out. So you drove your kid into fight. So let me pick up on this right now, because that actually gets my juices going. Because one of the things that I always believed about the new age parent is that today's parents and the kids have too many common interests.
it's difficult to tell, you know, a kid to do their homework or to clean their room whenever y'all got the same interest in TV station. Y'all got the same interest in acting like whenever I was coming up, even though I like listening to Luther Vandross, there's a difference between what I listen to and Jada Kiss and listening to Luther Vandross. You know what I'm saying? Nowadays, you know what I'm saying, because of you know, how time has been, you got parents that's 25 and the kids is 11.
You're right.
Yeah, I'm saying?
The same music.
Right.
Man, that's crazy because one of the greatest, and I told you about one of the best songs or videos that depict that scenario you're talking about was the Lupe Bad beat. Yeah. You know what I mean? I would tell all of our listeners, take a look at that video, Bad Beat by Lupe Fiasco. It's a powerful video and an image that it shows, but to Shawn's point, Brother Shawn's point, you got our parents rocking the same music that what their kids are. That's crazy. I mean, so what morals would you expect your kids to have if you don't have morals yourself? We got another comment.
I did want to say something about Brother Sadiq's comment or a question, because I think the part of pride is that part of character is that we don't take pride in character. Whenever you talk about how you're gonna instill it into the kids, family development. Right. So when I was thinking about this today on my desk, and I'm like, yo, like my mom and dad, like all 5 kids, well, 5 living out of the 7, we all got pretty good character. When I look at you, I see character. But y'all got to get his book. I read the rough draft. It's crazy. It's something I call it the wallet of the world, because I think character is something that we forgot. Like when you leave the house, like, dang, I forgot my wallet. And character is the wallet that everybody forgets. But going back to my point is that I take pride in the fact that, and I'm not saying I'm a special man, but if a woman come up to me and say whatever or try to, do whatever, I take pride in my, no matter how beautiful she may be. I'm married. I'm not lustful like that. You know what I'm saying? And of course I got my own flaws, but we don't take pride in character, morals and values.
Those are free things that we know. Exactly. And I think that in my book, that some of the best things in life are free. Right. You know what I mean? Character, morals, and values, that's powerful. We got another question or another comment from a sister, Jamila, down in Baltimore. Thank you. Said just because women can do doesn't mean they want to. We do because we have to. We want protectors, providers, and partners. But it's frustrating if men are not able to be those roles because there is no man to teach them. Powerful. Now we find ourselves teaching grown men how to be protectors, providers, and partners, which look like we are trying to change them. That's powerful. That last line, yeah. Because we eat a tentacle. So if a sister's telling you to do something, even though she's teaching you something, you might think she's trying to change you. I want to go do it, man. You know what I mean? Hold the door for the lady. Right. Hold the lady, hold the door for you. Say, what? Right. You told me what to do now? You know what I mean? So that's a good point.
Humility. And that goes to humility.
One of my character traits.
Yeah.
But that's the point of it, that, sisters, or we tell sisters to deal with that, because there's no man around. That's not right. You know what I mean? Because if you have a queen, because queens, on a chessboard, the queen is always one of the best pieces, right. On and the queen is the one who protects the king. Right. You understand? Right. So, when you have a queen willing to teach you something, you need to be humble, because you can't say that, my father wasn't, that's not his shoe. So I guess we got to find that queen who's willing to teach us and have patience with us. But that creates that conflict that we talked about before. Because a sister is like, God dang, why am I in this role? Right. She got to understand that. That's touchy right there.
It's touchy, but I think that the roles really haven't been defined very well, because I always say, like, we are talking about, raising to be a man. You can't teach somebody how to be a man. I don't believe that you can teach somebody how to be a woman. And again, there was a famous woman named Virginia Satir. She said, how do we define what a man and woman is whenever we haven't defined what a person is? When you look up in the dictionary, all it says is a man is a living, breathing male. Woman is a living, breathing female. All this other stuff is stuff that we put on it. But I think that, like, I have no problem at all submitting to a strong, powerful woman in certain areas. But I think that in the areas that I may not submit is certain things that may just come along with me being a masculine personality. it may be natural. Like you might just have to submit to. Like I'm not gonna submit to you trying to fight that person coming through the door.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna do that. I'll submit to something you say.
Right.
This house gonna be in the house.
Right.
You know what, baby? Cool.
Right.
I'll submit to that.
Right.
But I think if they talk, we talk about the mindset.
Right.
You got a lot of women who like want to submit to what they say, and they want to meet to do at the door.
Right.
Fight them like, that's not going down.
Right. But I'm coming back to this point because we know some women. Unfortunately, I know your mom, and I know thorough mom, and you both your friends who are thorough and they raise you right. But we ain't talking about Shawn.
Right.
We're talking about what we see out in this community.
Right.
You know what I mean? Right. We see the boys that she's talking about. I call them basement men.
Right.
You know what I mean? Some of these guys who wasn't raised with certain these bodies that I've been given to you that we might be naive to,
mm-hmm.
but this is our dealing with these brothers.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? We're dealing with these men out here. You understand? And that's what I said. It's interesting because of conflict on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
The sister's like, God damn, why I got to teach this guy this? And the guy's like, who is she to be telling me what to do?
Mm-hmm.
You understand? But where do you get to that happy median at? You understand? Or do you get to that happy median? That's an interesting conflict.
So when do you and I like that. So is there ever appreciating a dilemma where you made it a little better?
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's crazy. Speaking of, I'm building with a good friend of mine last night, and we were talking about, my thing is having uncomfortable conversation.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? So when you're going through this dating, the chivalry, so we didn't touch on that point, chivalry, when people used to date, you understand? But when you're going through these dating or getting to know somebody, you ask these uncomfortable conversations.
Right. And you got to.
You need to. You shouldn't be in bed and say, did you ever knock somebody outside the head? You know what I mean? You should have figured that out when you go through the thing. That's a conversation like, bro, what's your track record?
Right.
Bro?
Right.
You ever put your hands on loan before?
Right.
What's your credit like?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What's your finances like? What are your goals?
Right.
You know what I mean? In 5 years, where do you plan on visiting? You like to travel? Do you have a passport?
Mm.
You know what I mean? So these are the tough questions. Them ain't even tough questions that we don't ask. Like, how's your viewpoint? Do you like kids?
Yeah. I
got 2. You know what I mean? You got to, do you take care of your kids?
Yeah.
Because in my program, I used to find out, like, how do you not know this dude got 3 kids or 4 kids and you having a baby by him? They ain't take care of those 3.
Mm.
Why would make you think he's going to take care of you, but we don't ask these tough questions?
That's an uncomfortable question.
Yeah, we like to feel good.
We like to run from them.
Right.
Yeah.
So, when we talk about, going back to the system, when we talk about we want protectors and providers, you know what I'm saying? That question, or that area can be addressed within the first 2 weeks. Right. I mean, so check his track record.
Exactly.
Going back to the conversation we had on our previous show, that you got to check his track record. You got to check her track record. What is her medical record? Right. Exactly. Does she have schizophrenia or depression in her family?
Right.
Like, we don't have. That's uncomfortable. How do you ask somebody? You're nuts. You know what I mean? These medications. But I'm sorry. I don't want to go serious, but those are the questions that we need to have, right? And what medications you on? Right. Understand? These are the uncomfortable conversations. So you need to know somebody before you start. Once it gets physical, it's hurt.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Once you get that ooh wee,
right.
The orgasm, it's hurt.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. You get knocked upside your head, but once you then gave once people then who got physical, the tough questions and uncomfortable conversations go out the door.
Which is actually deep, because I actually talk about that in my book too. How you gotta assess. I call it the assessment. Spend some time with their family. Don't just assess that person. Assess the family, because there might be some things, some traits that you see in that person that are explainable by what you see in mom, dad, uncle. You know what I mean? If you see that, wow, like his uncle's been married 3 times, his dad's been married 4 times. You know what? He already been 2 times, and I don't want to be a third one. You know what I'm saying? But we don't do these type of assessments.
No. Those are uncomfortable.
Right.
We too busy, jumping into becoming too physical before we get into those. And once you start getting emotions and feelings involved, you don't necessarily have these questions. You don't ask these tough questions. Right. Then it's amazing. Like these conversations ain't nothing but a combination or the result of the many conversations I have with Good Brothas. Right. But my man was in town over the Christmas break last week, and he was talking about an older guy that that he knew was in his 60s, man. And he was talking about on his third marriage. He was saying that he's going through a divorce, and he didn't do it prenup. And Shorty was about to hit. You know, he was a well-off, older guy. And he was saying Shorty was, this young lady was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? And he was saying something, no, I'm sorry, she was on drugs.
Mm-hmm.
She was on crack or something. My man was like, God, dude, how do you not know that? You know what I mean? Like, how do you not know this person is on some serious drugs before you married her? Like, what happened once they get to know each other? You know, these things, once you get that feeling and once you get physical, these tough questions don't, have a tendency to go out the door, so we don't necessarily talk about that.
But that's a generational time.
Yes.
Because we live in a very, every time it's been lustful.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But now, even I think that my generation was the first generation to really start to behave extremely recklessly. Mm-hmm. So where there was less talking and more just doing. Let's just go.
I think my generation started to go.
You do?
Yeah, I think we started.
You think you did?
Yeah. Because it was, that's when the music changed. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Back in the 60s, 70s, it was love. Music. Just. But in the 80s, it was, let me touch you, let me get them and dance up on top of you. You understand? So you start, being a little bit more Philly.
A little bit more.
But y'all talking to a different day.
Extremely reckless.
Okay.
Extremely reckless.
We introduced you to it. Yeah. Okay.
And I remember one time there was a girl in my middle school, man. I was in 8th grade, and she was giving oral sex for $1. Now, of course, I did not engage in that. Okay. You know what I mean? I did not engage in that. But then fast forward to I was 23, 24 years old. I heard the same story of a 5th grader doing it, and I think that when I was 29, I was 23 in 2009. There was a 5th grader doing it for $0.25. Matter of fact, it made the news. You know what I'm saying? So you talk about like how the mindset just keeps getting worse. That's crazy.
I remember, speaking of that, I remember, going again, and this is before the internet. I had when I was teaching down in Maryland, and I remember reading a letter from a 2nd grader. Yeah, talking about getting oral sex and what she was exposed to and how detailed it was. And I'm like, wow, this is a 2nd grader. Wow. To where to the point that was 20 years ago. Now it's transitioning to where it's just reckless abandon.
Right, exactly.
It's gloves off. You know what I mean?
Right.
And you just,
literally.
Yeah. But look at TV.
Yeah.
So the generation, like back in the day, you figure in the 60s when Elvis came out. They thought it was offensive for him to shake his hips.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I remember you hear about the old heads, like when Elvis shook his hips on TV or the Beatles, that was crazy. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, you look at TV, man, it's like, what? And I ain't even talking about, cable. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying, TV and period. Like this generation, these kids are being exposed to everything at a young age. Mm-hmm. In my day, TV went off at 11 o'clock. Mm-hmm. And this generation nowadays, TV never goes off. You know what I mean? So you got kids watching unsupervised TV.
Well, in terms, I want to go back to answer what you said right now. You got to go back to what Sadiq asked because that character thing and that morality thing. Mm-hmm. You talk about thinking outside of the box, and you always say the box is the cell phone. Shaped like a box, the TV shaped like a box, the computer, PlayStation, thing outside the box, and that's so powerful. And as I think of, I don't care what nobody say about, Shawn, you was raised by 2 parents, you had it a little bit, whatever you want to call it. At some point, you have to, and I'm not saying that family like that is better, or a family like the Cosby's is better, but you got to look at that and say, they didn't care about what the rest of the world was doing. Mm-hmm. They thought about stuff outside of the box. So really, a more direct answer to Sadiq's question is that if you want to, you can't worry about the outside world. Mm-hmm. Change your world, and as more people start to change their world, we change the world. Right. And I also wanted to, one of the things that I wanted to bring up before we get off is the misconception and the myth that, the black community is the only one that doesn't have fathers there. Because I know when I was talking to you about some of the endeavors that you were in, you had come across some of our European counterparts who they were on the golf course too much. Mm-hmm. They were doing other things too much, and they weren't around. Mm-hmm. And for their entire lives, they've been subjected to parents who would just buy them off. Mm-hmm. Instead of taking them to the games, they, they would hire other people to do certain things. So we can't always believe that the black man is just the only male who's not in the home.
And I was talking about you think about the boarding. So sending your kids out to boarding school. You know what I mean? When you got more money, you don't want to deal because you're so busy. Right. So that's the absentee. Good point. I think we need to touch on that's the absentee parent, where you're not there. You know what I mean? You're a father. You got the means, but maybe you have to, I don't know. Out in certain neighborhoods, they got money to get you to certain jobs. But you don't hear about the stuff that goes on in our community. I know we only got a few more minutes, but I know one of the points that we didn't touch upon. With this generation, we got away from chivalry, the dating and stuff like that. But one of the things that we touched on a little bit briefly is about these PlayStations. You know what I mean? Like this obsession with electronic devices. Mm-hmm. You understand? Especially for brothers, that's taken away from your development, personal development. Where you're spending too much time on, sisters on Facebook, because we all need personal development. But we getting away from that quality time of developing ourselves. That all the time, the amount of time that we spend on these playing games, and that's something that needs to be addressed. And I know it sounds simple, but you figure the amount of time that some people spend on electronic devices. You can read a daggone book, you know what I mean? Or you can be engaging in some intellectual conversation that we ain't necessarily engaging in. So that's one of the things that I know it's almost coming up to a wrap. We got about a couple more minutes before we finish up. But that's one of the things that is caught. That generation. We also in a generation of electronics. I know my friends call me caveman. They know they on a call. I'm a caveman because I don't necessarily get caught in technology. But I think that it has contributed to the demise of our mindset. Because we too much to the box. And like I said, we got to think outside the box. Too many of us are being told what to do inside the box. Mm-hmm. You understand? So my thing is we need to start thinking outside the box, at least spending more time outside the box.
What's crazy is that there's always, I always bring up the catch-22 because when you look at the greatest business people and the people who have influenced the world, they always look at how to use whatever is the end thing in society to make themselves better. You a lot of people like Michael Jordan, always Magic Johnson. I read all their books. They always said that they were spending so much time working on their craft. They asked Kobe Bryant one time, like, we talked to your high school teammates, and they said that they feel like you lost out on your childhood because you was always practicing. He said, well, I felt like I was gaining something. He said, I felt like I was gaining. Yeah, I wasn't going to parties. Yeah, I wasn't doing this other stuff, but I was practicing every day. I felt like I was gaining something. So again, and I don't mean question, but going back to how we change things, just study success. Mark Zuckerberg, you can't tell me that Mark Zuckerberg spends all his time every day doing Facebook posting on social media. He's studying how to exploit the people who want to do that.
And he's doing a damn good job.
Right.
But we have about another 1 minute before we have to wrap up the show. Is there any closing?
One closing remark is that I'm definitely enjoying building people call in. I highly encourage you all to go to our websites and check out some of the products that we have. My website is www.perspectve.com. That's perspective without the I. I have 3 books that are phenomenal in terms of your personal development. Some services that you can check out. And if you won't pay the price for success, then don't desire the life of success.
Mm-hmm. Again, I want to thank you all for dialing in. I really appreciate your support. I also appreciate the people who emailed us some questions. Thank you for the questions. We had a couple we didn't get to. I apologize for that. Hopefully, in the next month or so, my book will be published. Looking forward to that. As we talk about character, and also you can go to our YouTube channel. We'll be posting these videos on YouTube for the people who missed out, and then also to thank you for all the support that you all give us, and thank you for continuing to call in. Have a wonderful evening. Give thanks.